it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, so you may be climbing the walls, you may be going stir crazy, but you're in it for the long haul, and as long as you are, we will be too. Forza! Yes, it's week 2 of social distancing, and we're back, but dutifully keeping a healthy distance of more than 2 metres to bring you yet another WGTA episode from the isolation booths. Unfortunately, Nick's not here today due to Mother's Day responsibilities. Not to worry though, as this week we've replaced him with someone equally sardonic as friend of the pod, Adam Pritchard, at 35Who on Twitter, you may know as Planet FPL's Arsenal correspondent, takes his debut bow. Adam, sorry it can't be under better circumstances, but great to have you. Please introduce yourself to the good folk, especially to any available young ladies maybe listening and fancy a virtual date.
Thanks very much for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure. So like you said, my name's Adam Pritchard. I am at 35Who on Twitter. I write articles occasionally for the guys over at Planet FPL, but more often than not, you can find me making terrible jokes and awful puns on Twitter. That appears to be my main hobby. So yeah, ladies, if that's what you like, you know where I am.
Orderly queue in 12 weeks' time.
Any queues now, 2 meters apart and outside his house, please. Adam, it's absolutely great to have you on. Welcome. All is well with me here as well in Brussels, where I expect to be for at least another month or two anyway. I've decided against going back to Ireland straight away, and I'm going to work from home here for a while. Belgium went into lockdown fully on Wednesday at midday. So since then, there's been barely any shops open, bar the bare essentials, and we're not really allowed out unless we're exercising, which of course is better than some countries, but still at the same time, it's a bit difficult. But look, I've been watching old matches, poorly doing toilet paper keepy uppies. I've been getting my hour a day outside and making sure I get it, and generally following all the news. So there's plenty still to keep me occupied at least. Just to say who we are Who Got the Assist. You will find this pod Twitter account at WGTA_FPL if you want to find Tom, who's there all the time. Nick is at WGTA_Nick, and you'll find me, FPL Stag, at FPL Stag. You will also find Adam, as he said, at 35Who. We're also on Instagram at WGTA.FPL. You can find this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. So this podcast, obviously we have no football to talk about. However, there is news regarding the football to come in the future at some point, we hope. So we're going to quickly discuss the press releases and discussions and leaks that have come through from the Premier League, UEFA and FPL. And then we're going to move on to the mountain of listeners' questions we've received. So thank you everybody who sent those in.
Yeah, just for those, again, a myriad of different things, and a few that are going to put Adam on the spot, which I'm really, really looking forward to. Just to preface, of course, before we get into it, we're obviously really worried about the developing situation, and our hearts do go out to everybody affected, which is everybody, but acutely so those who are currently self-isolating or suffering, and the key workers as well. I think it's worth giving a shout out to. You're doing an amazing job. It's absolutely incredible. During this podcast, we're obviously not going to speculate on the nature of COVID. We're an FPL podcast. We're not a medical podcast or anything like that. And we hope this podcast is taken with the spirit in which it is made, which is simply to hopefully make a small difference to you all with the platform that we're fortunate enough to have. Right, so the first thing normally, if this was normal times, would be to talk about the game reviews. This week, we all got 0, and I think it's going to stay that way for quite a while. But we did get an announcement from the Premier League, as Stag mentioned a minute ago. It looks like April the 30th is now the target date for things to kick off again in some way, shape or form. I'm pretty sure that's more of a hope than a solid date. And to me, it feels like it's not too far in the future that things still feel a bit kind of up in the air. Like at least it means that clubs can say, right, you've got 3 weeks off, guys, just to self-isolate, and you've got to come back. What do you guys think after hearing that announcement from the Premier League this week?
From my perspective, it feels far too close, really, because we're coming towards the end of March, so it's maybe a month and a half or so. It doesn't feel like by then we'll certainly be a good enough or a long enough distance rather for football to resume. But then again, I've been seeing some rumours on Twitter that Arsenal are certainly talking to the Premier League and health officials about maybe can they start training again. And you think if you've got a whole squad full of players able to train already, perhaps maybe April the 30th isn't so fanciful behind closed doors. But like you guys have said, and like we all keep saying, it's a very bizarre scenario and no one can really say for certain what's going to happen. So yeah, it feels a bit odd, but you never know.
So I guess building on what you guys have been saying, the 30th of April idea, the Athletic had a very good article kind of discussing this in detail, and I'm largely taking what I am coming with from that article, and I just want to give them that credit. But part of the reason why April 30th was decided was that, as you say, Tom, it's far enough away that it's far enough away, but it's not so far away that people forget about football either, and it can keep us in our conscience. But part of the idea as well is that the players now can be given 3 weeks off as a guaranteed thing. So, maybe looking towards returning to training perhaps then in 3 weeks would be optimistic, but at least that's what this kind of gives a certainty about. It's like, okay, football is not going to happen for a long time. The players can go and do the keepy uppies and whatever else they need to do. And that's fair enough. And that makes sense. But one thing that also came from the Premier League's meeting last week was that this season will be finished at some point. There's, in TV revenue alone, £762 million estimate on the line. And then when it comes to gate losses as well, it's about £30 to £45 million per club for all the games. So there's quite a lot to be lost here in terms of legal challenges, issues with the promoted teams. We went through it last week, so let's not get into it any further. Javier Tebas, who is the head of La Liga, was maybe a bit more optimistic, or a bit more realistic, than the Premier League in this, and that he said that he hopes that La Liga could be finished by the 30th of June. And goodness, you do wonder, sounds optimistic. Like even that Athletic article was suggesting that even the clubs were understanding the kind of the situation that they may need to play these games indoors. That works for Premier League teams who make so much money from TV revenues. But when you talk about down the football pyramid and everything has a knock-on effect, that's not quite the same. You can't really have the Premier League finishing behind closed doors and having a transfer window and kind of the other divisions happening in limbo. So I feel like there's going to have to be some kind of like synthesis between the leagues, and no one's quite worked that out. So there is a huge amount left to be ironed out. Regardless, though, what this is it is the summer break now for the players. So what we're going to end up with is whenever the next season, the 2020-21 season comes, it's going to come probably just about 2 weeks after the end of this season, whenever that ends. And they're still hoping to use August 8th as the starting date for next season, maybe perhaps finishing the Premier League season in late July if that was to fall through.
Yeah, I think the point is just not be too transfixed on like actual dates now and trying to think about it as a season running from August to May. I think that's kind of completely out the window, and it's just a case of the best fit effectively. Like the FA, for example, have removed the stipulation in their charter binding the dates of when a season can be defined as beginning and ending, which is a huge deal for the FA actually. They're an organisation whose internal agility would make the bedbound geriatric look dexterous. They are they used to be a client of mine, and they're very, very slow inside. So I think that's kind of a big sign that they are taking it to some extent as if the season is going to be completed no matter what, which I think is a good thing. I think that's probably the best approach, to be honest, because otherwise we'd end up with the the Liverpool fan debate would just roar on forever, and I don't think anybody needs that on their timeline, do they? Yeah, on the UEFA and the Premier League, the sponsors, £760 million, and being sued for that is absolutely mental. I hope it doesn't descend into corona violence with that sort of thing. Like this witless bureaucrats showing all the tax of a butcher at a vegan buffet, aren't they? Really, like I can't believe that money's already coming into it. But there you go. Like it is absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, I guess that those are the realities of the situation. I think the hope is that obviously that we're going to find some sort of sensible way of ending the season. I think that's all we can hope for. But I guess how we finish the season is also going to be quite interesting. And Stag, last week you had a few interesting ideas on this, which I think are starting to germinate a little bit. A mini tournament or something, just to kind of rattle through the games, get it all finished, and then gear up for the next season to be a quote-unquote proper season again.
Yeah, we welcome, of course, the Premier League organisers who are taking my ideas to the podcast. It's great to have you back for another week. But what I kind of settled on was that I felt that this season would just have to be played out in a slightly truncated format at the time. And I guess maybe as things have kind of developed, what I was sure of was that this season had to be finished and couldn't not be finished. I wasn't quite going for the five-a-side or neutral venue in the Gulf type scenario, but I was kind of considering this idea where, let's say we maybe played just, every 4 days or something for a few weeks. And I had ideas for FPL with that. Now, Gary Neville kind of came out with this, what I think truly daft idea of a festival of football where everyone will be playing 9 days in a row. which is insane. And like, that's just going to have Achilles and ACLs and everything going mental. That's just not going to work. But is there potential that they could agree on a new structure, like a Champions League or World Cup type format, where everything is kind of broken down into a group stages and knockout? And, you know, it's harsh on Liverpool, who are of course a mile ahead of everybody, to bring them down to like a one game format. But if the Premier League are, and it seems like they are, trying to hold on to the old calendar for next season, then maybe that makes sense as just a method of kind of getting the games through rather than having this kind of long running saga. But yeah, this season will be finished. Liverpool will hopefully lift the title, as they should deserve to. But, and it's not easy for me to say that, but how it will be done, I don't know.
Something that I don't really know if it's been talked about as much is that if we're thinking players are going to have a minimum of a 3-week break now, how this truncated season impacts on them fitness-wise and injury-wise is going to be quite significant, because they're going to go at least 3 weeks with no games. They've already gone however many weeks with no sort of formal training, as it were. They're all doing barbell presses in their homes and, like you keep saying, Stag, keepy uppies with toilet rolls. And far be it from me to comment on their professionalism, but I don't think that's ideal preparation for a game. So if you take Gary Neville's idea of playing X many games in a row, which does seem completely laughable, really, there's no way that all the players are going to be able to play all the minutes all the time, and that there are going to be hamstring injuries, there are going to be Achilles injuries, there are going to be all sorts of issues that I don't know if the authorities or many people have really thought about.
What are you talking about, mate? Back in the 80s, everybody played 2 games every 2 days. No, I know what you mean, though. It's I think that it'd just be interesting to see what's gonna happen. Like, normally you have friendlies, you know, it's the essence of match sharpness, isn't it? And I think that's what declines over time. Like, if you read the Secret Footballer's book, what the physio saw, he says, you know, conditioning is so key in getting players to that point where they are match sharp, they're able to go again and again and again. Match fitness, match sharpness, that's going to be completely eroded now. And I think it'd be really interesting to see, once they do come back, what things are going to be like, because we just the season is going to has this kind of this big break in it, and you may even see kind of the meta completely shift between those 2 breaks in the season. But yeah, really interesting to talk about. And I guess kind of the further knock on, the reason why we're here is FPL. I think we need to mention at this point that, of course, they couldn't have anticipated this, and this shouldn't come across as criticism if it's just the situation they're in. So it's a comment that's worth making, just in case anybody is going to start defending the hierarchy in comments. This week, FPL basically turned around and said, well, you know what, we really can't do anything about it. So basically it's as it was until game week 36. Which is really, really interesting. So it leads to the obvious question: should we even bother making transfers? Should we even bother looking at the game? FPL Lad on Instagram asked this as well. He said, are you using your FTs or just letting them burn? Can we use 6 free transfers as the world's most patient wildcard ever? I think this is an interesting question to talk about. Just because it just doesn't seem like they've got the ability to freeze the game. Like, the key point is that if they could, I'm 100% sure they would have. But it seems that they've got the basic package from whatever they bought the white label. A good analogy is that they're driving the car, but they aren't engineers. They don't know how to fix it. They just, if you see what happens with every time there's an issue with someone's account or something, I just think they actually can't fix it. It's not they don't want to, it's just they can't. They just haven't got that sort of access. And it looks like a kind of a non-Oopal game week. That looks like what's going to happen, I think, if they still decide within the confines of 38 game weeks how it's programmed to play the season out. We're just going to see an absolute bonanza of game week 38, aren't we? I can't really see any other way they do it unless they just cut it all off now and say, right, okay, Euro is Roar, put a big asterisk next to the season, and then we'll do like a mini tournament in the summer. That seems to be the best way of doing it to me, just because I think that with the software they've got and how they're going to structure it, either we have like quintuple game weeks, or we just get rid of this all and just have like a little fun tournament in the middle, and then next year have a proper season again. That seems to be the best way of doing it.
It seems to me like they're almost hoping everyone kind of forgets about fantasy football, which, I mean, I guess wouldn't be sort of a unreasonable thing to think. But
It's
like
a
you
fair
say,
comment, I think, isn't it?
well, yeah, exactly. But like you say, it's bizarre that they don't have the ability just to pause the game and sort of try and restructure things. But my perspective would be, maybe it is fair enough to say sort of basically what you said, Tom, sort of finish the season now, say you can put an asterisk next to it if you like, and then have a summer tournament with a separate prize and a completely separate thing, as if treat it almost as if it was a Euros fantasy, but within the Premier League, something like that.
So I guess for me, dealing first of all with FPL Lad's question about the free transfers, I'm just letting them burn. I did an initial transfer, but now it's just like, look, we don't know when this is going to be back. Like, presume that when this game does return, they're going to have to allow us a wild card, an extra wild card, or something to reset our teams. We don't know exactly how the schedule is going to work out anymore. We don't know which game week it's going to return. So it kind of seems completely futile to be making transfers. Now, when it comes to the Premier League and their basic software package and things, so I think what the official Premier League statement, the Fantasy Premier League statement that we got during the week kind of confirmed to me was that this basic software package means that this season really, I think, needs to be ended as it is right now. And then for us to play a kind of a Euros or World Cup mini format type game with whatever game weeks are left, because the season will be finished. When you think about what this is, and Tom kind of touched on it when he's talking about like the drivers who can't fix the engine. What the Fantasy Premier League is it is a marketing tool run seemingly by marketing people, especially the Twitter account. And so in such a way, what they need to do is use the game in such a way that it attracts eyeballs. The Premier League is going to be competing with so many other sports for eyeballs when this returns. Seemingly every game under the sun is going to be played in July or August when this returns, in every sport we know, because everything was stopped and all the summer games are going to be back in as well. It's going to be a nightmare. So they need to use Fantasy Premier League to hook us in. If they go for septuple or quintuple or dectuple or whatever game weeks, we're all setting and forgetting a team and then leaving it for a month, 10 days, if it's the Gary Neville madness scenario. Either way, it's not interesting. It's not going to hook us. We're not returning to the game week after week. We're not looking at fixtures. We're not thinking about players. We're not trying to figure out who's good. It just doesn't work. So the best thing to do is kill the season now, and then they have us on the fishing line again, classically, for 7 weeks or 7 game weeks, just hooking us along, the fish just dying, gasping for air as we try to figure out which captain to pick, and inevitably just being eaten for dinner.
I think Stag's point is really good about a lot of this revolves around marketing and how it is effectively a marketing arm of the Premier League. And if you think if they package that sort of mini tournament at the end of the season as something really brand new and exciting, it's Summer Premier League, you can get a trip to Barbados, if that's even possible by then.
No, it's an all expenses trip round England, unfortunately. It will be summer though, so it will be, at least 20 degrees.
Sure, at least. So if they package it up as this new exciting opportunity, maybe test out some new rules, test out some new chips, things like that. It's a chance for them to be creative, which if the guy running the Twitter account has any control over the rules, perhaps we could see that.
But like, this is the return of sport. This is the return of your routine. This is the return of football. Like, it's just so packageable. It's like it's a marketer's dream in one sense, but it's going to be the most competitive environment in terms of eyeballs, I think, that you're going to get. And so I just think that that's the only option, and think that they have to take it.
Yeah, I feel like we're just working out their marketing strategy for them here, aren't we? But absolutely makes sense though. I can't see that them trying, like they struggled last year, for example, to explain the double game weeks and the chip season in the format they like, which is one sentence per paragraph in really basic language. Imagine them trying to explain a non-Oopal game week to people. It's just not going to happen, is it?
But Tom, like, imagine trying to keep people engaged with a 9 game week in one game week where you set your team once.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Especially,
just doesn't
bench
work.
boost. I don't know. The more I think about it, obviously, it's just shooting the breeze here. The more I think about it, yeah, some sort of a SFPL, summer FPL, it would probably be a good idea. It would be nice, Adam, if they came up with some new rules and some new chips or something, but that would be too confusing for new people, wouldn't it? So they're going to keep it as it was, just to make it really, really obvious. Right, and the final bit here, how do we feel about FPL now? Because obviously we're out of the cycle. We've broken out of it. It's like the summer now, isn't it? PLO's Pen asked, how are you guys feeling the FPL void? And I think that's just worth kind of voicing over a tiny bit. Like, I think for me, the spell is broken a little bit. It does feel like summer. It's an enforced rather than an elective break. It'll be great to come back, and it'll be great to... No, I can't wait for the time when my weekends are ruined by my FPL plans imploding rather than a deadly virus. That's probably the pivviest way I can put it. It sounds a bit comedic, doesn't it? But that's the truth of it. But right now, I do love the podcasting. FPL, that's got to come back when everyone's safe, right? It could happen indoors. It could be behind closed doors. As long as the sun's still shining and everyone's happy, everyone's healthy, I don't really care. FPL is always lovely. It's a great distraction, but there you go. Adam, what do you reckon?
I think what it's kind of showed me this little break without it is, it's just going to sound horrendously sort of twee and romantic of me, but it was always the community that I enjoyed more than the
Oh,
game
Oh my
itself.
God,
my
give
God.
over.
It's you
Oh.
guys. I'm just doing it for you guys. I love you all so much. No, but seriously, it's like we were sort of chatting about it earlier, and I think it was you, Tom, posted, "Oh, Harvey Barnes price rise," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I had Harvey Barnes in my team. I completely forgot about that." But it's I think what you're seeing is, especially on Twitter, all sorts of interesting and different ways people are trying to keep engaged with the community in general, to show that perhaps maybe we don't need FPL to all get along. Maybe that was the secret inside of us all this time. We can be friends without it, possibly.
Are you joking me? Have you ever been on FPL Twitter in this national break? Like, everyone's just arguing with each other. Everyone's at each other's throats when there's no
Or the
football.
summer, July. Oh, July.
That's true.
As some people started quote retweeting each other's tweets and going, "What the hell is this going about?" Yeah, no, we've got some stuff obviously about the community later on, but I think that's a very valid point. All soppiness and cringing at the soppiness aside, yeah, it is obviously the people who are still commenting, the people who aren't the fair weather FPL commenters, are the people who are there and are part of a proper community, which I think does exist. So yeah, I think that's definitely very, very cool to see, and we'll speak about the community stuff in the next section.
I subscribe to Rory Smith, the journalist of the New York Times. He has a newsletter he sends out every Friday, and just in the correspondence at the end of that particular thing this week, a guy, Edward Baker, was quoting a baseball writer called Thomas Boswell, and I think he kind of sums up my feelings quite well about FPL right now, in that for us, I think as football fans, time has kind of stopped. So what that Boswell fellow had said in an essay called "Why Time Begins on Opening Day," he was saying that life is once again restored to us in its fullness, and in its absence, the feeling of the diminution is inescapable. And I think that kind of gets at the idea of what the Premier League and FPL and football does for us, especially as podcasters and writers about FPL, is that it's kind of the gel within our weekends and almost our week. You know, you look forward to it. It comes around. This game's on. You know, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are Champions League nights in the spring. The World Cup comes around in the summer, and everything's just a bit out of place. And so it's not just FPL; it's football that you kind of just miss. And so I've been filling the FPL void to answer Pirlo's Penn's question with football, actually. So on Saturday, Newcastle United on their YouTube channel streamed the Newcastle 4 Arsenal 4 game from 2011, and I had a quick look online to figure out when the goals were scored, and I figured out that Newcastle's 4 kind of came after the hour mark. So I decided I would just kind of tune in tactically at about 60 minutes to watch all 4 goals in the comeback, and it was absolutely it was beautiful. So you've got 2 penalties in there from Joey Barton, and of course the big screamer from Czech Tiote as well. So absolutely brilliant game to watch, and you're watching all these like golden heroes of Arsenal, of course Wenger on the sideline, and Squillaci and Gail Clichy, and Cesc Fabregas is there, and Theo Walcott, who still looked young in 2011. Like it was great to watch. There was also a Formula 1 Grand Prix being streamed live on YouTube yesterday. So it was the Brazil one from 2016, a very heavy, wet one with Felipe Massa crashed out in his final home Grand Prix. It was terribly emotional. Max Verstappen came from midway through the field to pull his way up to the podium. Really fantastic stuff. I watched an All-Ireland hurling final from 2014, the first game, if anyone's questioning the Tipperary-Kilkenny drawn final. Brilliant game as well from 2014. Otherwise, how I've been filling the FPL voids with cooking. I've been playing board games with my housemates, with podcasts. One of my favorite ones at the moment is one that's just started in this new phase of life called Isolating, with the comedian David O'Doherty. It's an Irish comedian, and it's on Second Captains. And David O'Doherty is a man with two parents, as you would have, in their 80s. And so, given they're in an at-risk group, he's moved to rural Mayo, or Achill Island, for anyone who's being a bit more specific with the geography. And he's kind of just charting kind of the madness of what he's doing. He's playing Trivial Pursuit with questions from 2009, and so his brain is like clicking into the 2009 questions, and yet still he can't escape the reality of the world, because there was a question about the H1N1 virus in there and what it was commonly known as. And and he's been being chased by hares on a bicycle that doesn't have brakes, but there's no cars, so it doesn't matter. It's pretty great.
Yeah, definitely. Esoteric pursuits are probably the way forward, aren't they? No, I guess during the time off, what have I been doing? I've been on Twitter, but to a lesser extent. I definitely, last week I said that I was thinking about buying a Switch when it was talking about it. I accidentally did buy that Switch Wednesday last week. I mean, the girlfriend wanted a mouse for her computer, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to be environmentally friendly here, and I'm going to buy a Switch as well, because it means I only need to make one delivery rather than two. And so I did that. I said I had a voucher or something, and she has bought it, I think. So we were okay. I just told her it's just little. It's quite an old console. It's all right, and she hasn't told me off yet. And let's just hope she just listens to this.
She's obviously a big fan of the podcast. If you're saying that,
Number one fan.
Yeah, exactly. But she's enjoyed watching me play Zelda this week. That's for sure. Yeah, obviously the productivity for work has gone down a little bit, but as I said, just kind of seeing what's going on and just keeping up with it, I suppose, in terms of what's going on in the community, we'll speak about in a sec, and other things like that. It's just been taking my mind off it, as it were. And Adam, finally, what have you been up to?
Well, I tweeted this a couple of days ago, but I've been watching tackle montages of Bakary Sagna. I watched a old YouTube video of Nacho Monreal and Santi Cazorla playing keepy-uppies with a tennis ball. But I still won't watch Australian football. Still won't do it. Won't sink to that level, but I'll watch all sorts of, if you've got a vine of a footballer kicking a toilet roll, I'll watch that. I've watched a lot of dog videos for some reason.
you're taking dog videos over Wes Houlihan.
I'm just glad you said dog and not dogging videos, to be honest.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, I was going to come on to that, but, maybe...
Oh, bad choice of words.
Oh, jeez.
That's staying in.
Oh, dear.
Nice work. Well, that's us in the explicit category for another week.
Yeah, I think so. After last week's shithousery.
Yeah.
All right, I think we should probably cut that short there before it disintegrates any further, and move on to the questions after the short break while we compose ourselves.
Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
So we're back, and I think that the first thing we talk about this week before we get to the questions, an inaugural new section, a feature, things making us smile. Let's be optimistic. And I think it's fair to say that the memes of this, from this kind of altogether bizarre period, have definitely been helping us through it. The first thing, we're actually going to put this into the podcast. It's the biggest lasagna meme. Just take a listen first.
Also, just so you know, my sister, her boyfriend's brother, works for the Ministry of Defence, and one of the things that they're doing to prepare, and this won't affect London, this will be everywhere, they're basically worried that people are going to get stuck indoors without any food. So one of the things that they're doing is they're actually working on making a massive lasagna. So they're actually, at the moment as we speak, they're building like the massive lasagna sheets. And they're just going to start making the layers today, and then hopefully, like, obviously put the bolognese on, and then put the sheets on top. But they're having to make the special sheets, obviously, because they've not got one big enough, because they're making lasagna the size of Wembley Stadium. So how they're doing it is they're actually putting the underground heating at Wembley. That's going to like bake the lasagna, and then they're going to put the roof across, so it's like recreate an oven. And then what they're going to do is they're going to like carry that. They've got loads of drones, and they're going to like lift it up with the drones, and they're going to like cut off little portions and like drop them into people's houses, just so to make sure everyone's eating still and no one dies, which is obviously quite sensible. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to that, because I do quite like lasagna as well, so fair play to them.
It's just that line at the end, because I do quite like lasagna.
It's such a good ending. Because I do quite like lasagna. Fair play to them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I absolutely creased up.
Yeah.
So that meme was made by Billy McLean, a guy from London, and I guess it's got a serious point behind it. As you heard, we all found it hilarious, but he's showing the power of how WhatsApp can spread misinformation and things like that. But yeah, absolutely priceless. Really, really well done, I think. Another one that I like this week is the guy who was asked A or B on quarantine. Have you guys seen that?
That was a quality one. Yes.
Yeah. You've got two choices, mate. A, you're quarantined with your wife and family, or B, definitely B. Yeah, really, really good. What my apocalypse outfit looked like, I really liked as well. And there was a good Irish one as well that was sent on the Dublin meetup group, which has now turned into loads of Irish people and me, some sort of a strange inaugural thing where I'm one of them now, according to Tony Gemmell, which is very nice. But there was a meme in there, beware everybody, Ireland's now sober, after the shutdown, which I thought was brilliant. Also this week, as Stag mentioned earlier, football clubs have been doing things. So, the 4-4 was played out. Also, I saw hashtag Wenger out was trending. So I had a look and I was like, what's he done now? I thought he'd made some sort of ridiculous sort of comment in his new role for FIFA. But no, it was the Arsenal-Leicester game where we won 4-3, halcyon days. And I saw also there's a few things like FIFA as well. So I saw Neil Maupay actually scoring a goal rather than missing a gaping chance. What have you guys seen this week?
Yeah, so just building on that with players playing games, Borja Iglesias and Sergio Reguilon played out the Seville derby last weekend as it was meant to be played out at the time. So obviously Betis versus Seville and on FIFA. And then this week, kind of taking from that, there was a 3-day FIFA tournament where one player from each La Liga team represented each club playing against each other. So it was Friday through to Sunday, I think. So Marco Asensio, Sergio Roberto, and Adnan Januzaj were amongst the players for that tournament. So that was pretty cool.
Noticed a lot of clubs have started playing Connect 4 and like sort of doing all sorts of noughts and crosses things on Twitter, which it starts out being quite funny, and then you see sort of like Barnet trying to play, I don't know, guess who against Bayer Leverkusen. You think this has gone down a weird rabbit hole, not something I ever thought I'd see. But no, yeah, it's nice to see that they're sort of realize, obviously it's social media, so they're trying to grow their brand, etc., and you can be very cynical about it, but it's nice to see they're trying to keep people engaged, I guess, for a little bit.
Yeah, and some of the clubs as well, some unfortunately, and not all, but not every club is a financial might maybe if Premier League clubs are supporting their communities and they're giving out food parcels and they've been paying their staff in spite of the fact that games aren't going ahead, and this sort of thing is obviously brilliant to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's lots of good stuff going on. I saw, for example, tonight Liverpool FC were saying that their stewards were available to help in the community with just provide manpower and things like that, which is absolutely awesome. In the FPL community itself, just to give a shout out to Champman FPL. Give them a follow at Fantasy Champman if you're interested. This is something created by Simple Goal FPL, Andy Martin and James Lepren. And Rob Picks is also doing a great job as the CM Scout. It's basically the CM 2001-2002 game. They're simming the season. You can download an Excel and make a team. It's really absorbing. Obviously, it's something that other halves may look dimly upon, but it's definitely something which is really absorbing. And you can follow the meta game as well, which is really cool. Lots of excellent stuff. So, for example, Vieira's already been sold by Arsenal, and there's injuries for the likes of Juan, Seba, Veron, and Alan Boksic in the friendlies. There's blanks and doubles already. Liverpool have the Super Cup. Newcastle beat Villa 2-1 in the Intertoto Cup. So there's a blank in game week 2, which rules out Shearer. Anyway, it's very cool. So get your head into it if you want to. Getting your head back into that time again. I was 12. You guys were presumably 2. It's really interesting to see that. All right. Okay. Anything else in the community we should mention, actually, before I move on?
No, but has anyone been singing on like a balcony or out a window on your street?
I think I'd just be told to shut them up, mate.
There was actually a brilliant comparison video, and you've like opera singers in Italy and lads on pianos on like squares or plazas in Spain. And then there was a guy started singing Bohemian Rhapsody out his window in the UK, and there was just one person who said, "Shut the fuck up, mate." Up at him. It was like captured the thing. Yeah, there's some great stuff actually in Spain as well, of like lads doing bingo out their window, out their balcony, and like all of the people in their whole entire community playing the bingo along with them. And yeah, there's some pretty great creative stuff going on.
Absolutely. What's even funnier is that we've gotten to balcony fatigue, where some people have said, if I see another video of Italians being friendly out of their balconies, being happy out of their balconies, I'm going to scream. I was like, well, that really is us now in a nutshell, isn't it? That we're getting make everyone happy fatigue. Yeah, ridiculous. Right, now let's move on to the questions before we go down that rabbit hole. The first thing is to talk about the Mad Fustercluck / mini tournament. If that happens, what will we do? What sort of players will we be looking at? Wow, an actual FPL question, I know. But anticipating mayhem, Ian, FPL Strategic, and FPL_manager_ on Instagram ask, which players will we be looking at if there's that sort of crazy end of season, if that materialises? So let's assume that will happen. What sort of players do you reckon might be figuring on our radars? Is it just the obvious ones?
I think so, yeah. I think it's kind of, you have to take that classic approach. avoid the rotation risks. Like, I mean, Riyad Mahrez was on his way out for a lot of fantasy managers anyway, but I mean, I certainly wouldn't be trusting him in that kind of period. I think people like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who are nailed to start with a decent run of fixtures coming up, are sort of the ones that you want to be eyeing. And I guess sort of looping back to what I said quite a while ago about fitness and how that will be impacted, you want to be going for those players who you would consider more likely to be able to have the capacity to play a lot of games in a short amount of time. I guess that would be my opinion.
So you're saying pick James Milner?
100%, and captain. I mean, he's on pens. So
This is true. Like, if it was 8 games in a row type thing, like Salah definitely wouldn't make it through that. So you probably would pick Milner in that scenario.
Milivojevic. Nailed on captain, isn't he?
Great
Because
pick.
Zaha's going to play every game, right? It's like, the classic rejoinder. People go, "Oh, he's going to be rotated," and you go, "You know what? If you're worried about rotation, just pick a team of Burnley, Palace, Brighton players. Well, Brighton before Potter, anyway. But now that might be true that you're going to want to have, the Gary Cahills in your team, the Milivojevic in your team. Maybe a Raul Jimenez and Jota will be flogged, but I don't know.
Mark Noble.
Oh yeah, Martin Noble. God, it's a team of penalty takers. If Harry Kane will be back by then, so you can put him in your midfield or something like that. Who knows?
Marcus Rashford.
Mustafi, anyone?
No, that's. But yeah, no, I think you'd definitely, it's definitely true. If there was a non-Upal game week, you probably want players who, as a baseline, are going to get you, what would that be, 18 points just for showing up to every game? That's pretty good. So you can probably outscore people who are going for boom and bust. Say, okay, this player is probably going to play half the game, just over half, so he might play for 5, get some subs, and you're hoping for a couple of goals in that period. Unless somebody who can get you 18 points off the bat, why not?
And when all is said and done, you will still outscore me.
But yeah, I think the point we made earlier on about there being kind of this fissure between the season proper and then what's going to happen at the end will be really key, and it's obviously really hard to answer that question, all jokes aside. But keeping it serious, next question is Bog Roller. A friend of the pod, James Crow, asked, who in your current FPL teams is the biggest toilet roll holder? Adam, what do you reckon?
Now, I took this 2 ways. It's like, who in my current FPL team would hold the most toilet roll, and who do I think is going to be going out there panic buying toilet roll right now? And that's a little bit of a difficult one. I can see, I mentioned it earlier, I can see Aubameyang liking to stock up on his toilet roll because he likes his flash lifestyle. I can see him kind of almost building a throne out of Andrex Super Soft for some reason. Not sure why. And then who is the biggest toilet roll holder in general? It's a difficult question to answer.
Would you not go back to Mustafi again there, considering he never keeps clean sheets?
I don't think I've ever owned him in FPL. Oddly enough, I know that'll be a shock to you. Why wouldn't I own a terrible Arsenal defender? I guess Woodman probably is the biggest toilet roll holder, the goalkeeper who is actually on loan at Swansea, because he's never played. So...
yeah, okay. So that's kind of like the Didier Deschamps water carrier sort of thing taken to new levels. He's just kind of just fulfilling a role without being particularly glamorous, I see. I just thought the goalkeepers, just because they can use their hands on the pitch, right? No, okay.
I'd settled on Lewis Dunk because in my brain, he's in quarantine with Shane Duffy. So I just felt like they probably would need a lot of toilet roll between the two of them.
What are you suggesting they're eating? Duffy's just preparing the jalfrezi every night.
Just a pint of kidney beans.
I just got visions of Duffy telling me, going, "Here you go, Lewis. Here's your jalfrezi." I don't know why that's happening.
Only 18 sheets of paper for tomorrow, Shane. Only 18.
Oh God! And keeping to the same sort of area, another crap question, literally, is from Late Riser, who asks, why don't people out in the UK use a bidet instead of TP? Pretty much everybody in India uses a bidet. Why don't we use a butt flusher in the UK / in Ireland or Brussels for you, Stag?
I think this is Adam's area of expertise.
I'm so glad you asked me this question because I have prepared actually a 15-page monologue. I'm not going to say what I was going to say there.
Can't read out the 15 pages. How about the executive summary?
I was gonna read out the 15 pages, but I run out of bog roll.
You see, yeah, I actually
He
now
just
I don't
enjoyed
use-
writing it that much.
Oh dear. I don't know. It's a great question. It really is.
So I was in Japan once, and I arrived at the airport in Tokyo. I hadn't slept in approximately 20 hours at this point, and I went into the bathroom, as you do after getting off the plane, I think it was to do a number two, if you want the details, folks. So I would have needed toilet paper. But I couldn't help but notice that there was effectively like a keyboard at the side of the toilet, like right there, kind of, if you were to sit down, it was on your right. There was just like a keypad. There must have been maybe a dozen buttons, 2 rows of 6. And before I sat down, I kind of couldn't help but I had to figure out what these all did, because I could tell that it was heated already. Like, you didn't need to even look at it to know that this thing was warm seat as well. So this is a heated toilet. This is a high-tech toilet if I've ever seen one. So I was like, right, I'll try out these buttons. So the first one, I didn't know what it did. Like, there was a load of them, and I was just kind of like, they must be just adjusting the temperature or the angle of the seat or something, because I couldn't really see from standing up what they were doing. But then I clicked one of them, and so there was this kind of like enclave that you could see within the toilet bowl itself, but I didn't know what this enclave was. I could just tell that there was like something in this thing. And when I pressed this button, suddenly just this thing shoots out, and just immediately water starts spraying vertically upwards towards my face. This was obviously some sort of like high-tech bidet system, and I just about dodged it. And that's why I don't want a bidet.
I just don't know how to use them, really. I know it sounds really strange, but the butt flusher thing, 'cause you see it when you go on holiday to continental Europe and stuff. You're like, well, what's that for? I don't want to see what goes in there. I think it's a cultural thing. It's probably the clever answer here. That it's just how we culturally deal with our stuff is different wherever you are. Like, I know
They're great for swimming togs. You know, if you're on like a beach holiday or something, just toss them
That's
in there.
true, actually. That's a good point.
Great use.
I think that's what we've done in the past. Just used it as an ancillary place to stick wet stuff. That sounds really dodgy again, doesn't it, in the spirit of this pod? Adam, what are your views on bidets? I know that you've got a 15-page monologue, but really, why don't you use a butt flusher?
I think it's like you say, because this is going to sound weird. I think I'd be a little bit scared of them. Like, do you like turn it on and then position yourself, or do you position yourself and then turn it on? It's a whole minefield of scatological nonsense, really.
And like, if you need to, you obviously have to wipe afterwards. Do you then sit down on the toilet?
I don't know. Like, surely it's wet then. So then you've got to use toilet paper anyway.
Yeah.
To get rid of. Are you using a towel? Are you telling me you're going to use your house towel and then wash it?
Or even the hand towel, Tom.
Yeah, or just have like
Laterizer. What are you using a towel?
I think,
yeah.
can we get Laterizer on with like a voice memo type thing, just to give us the lowdown on bidets?
Yeah, I think he's coming on game week 3 next year if that happens. So we'll be sure to ask him then. But yeah.
In week 3, we look forward to speaking to you in 2022.
All right, hang on. Let me see if FPL B-Day is available on FPL Twitter. Let's move on and let's move ourselves out of the gutter, shall we, and move to something more interesting. So, General Zod says, can you talk about the psychology of preparing yourself and your family for 3 to 6 months of social distancing? What are you planning on doing to keep the mind and body healthy? These are some of the steps he's taking are things like setting achievable goals, sticking to routines, and closely managing his resources. I did have a think about this one because I think it's quite an interesting question. Obviously, something that a lot of people are facing at the moment. And the watchwords for me are resilience and acceptance. Resilience, bounce back ability if you're in Holloway, and accepting the situation and trying to thrive in it. Yeah, much easier said than done, isn't it? But yeah, I watched a TED talk a while ago by a clinical psychologist, and a few kind of pragmatic steps that I've adapted from that for this answer is that 1, your struggle is real. Just accept it as your reality. The confines are there. We're all going through it. So the sooner you stop sort of denying them or railing against them and accept them, the sooner you can progress so kind of mentally. The second thing is everyone has been through something kind of awful in their lives. There's always an experience that you can draw on, what you did, what you felt, how you behaved. Try to kind of draw on that and kind of think, okay, it's not as bad as that, hopefully. The third thing is take the initiative. In our case, practically try to find and do things that will help you through it, like Zod drawing up those steps, just little things that will help you along. The fourth thing is to take social breaks from your fellow lock-ins. So, your family, you love them, but you're around them the whole time. Things can get a bit fraught, and that's kind of understandable. Video conferencing software like the House Party app is really useful. Even just a video call, Men in particular can be awful at reaching out to their mates, especially if you just meet down the pub kind of coincidentally after work. Just whack a friend a text and arrange to have a virtual beer. Like, it will definitely get your spirits up to talk to someone other than your other half or your family and things like that. I think it will definitely give you like a little mental lift. And the final thing is to be kind to yourself in whatever outlet you use. Like, don't charge yourself for watching that one extra episode, listening to that one extra track, playing that extra half hour. It's a tough time. I'm not going to condone drinking or smoking too much because you're adults, but like, it still feeds into the main point. Just don't be too hard on yourself. And at the risk of sounding like a prat, we're all in this together. Social media is awful as a source of news at this point, as you just see loads of crap. But there's so many people other than just your WhatsApp contacts in there. At its best, as we mentioned earlier, the memes, the conversation, the camaraderie is a fantastic source of strength. Just to help us all through. Just be kind to each other, but definitely use that to reach out to people as well beyond kind of the people that you're living with. I think that's really, really useful too.
No, yeah, I think it is a really interesting question because, I mean, Tom can attest, I'm pretty good at socially distancing myself from him. So isolation, perhaps for me, is more something I'm familiar with. I don't tend to go out a lot, but it's still difficult knowing that you don't have that option. But yeah, I'm going to learn to bake. I'm going to try and learn to bake and not poison myself. I think I might take up knitting. Now is the time for knitting. So if you ever decide to have me on again, you'll see me wearing an Arsenal hat. Yeah.
You're going to be like the quintessential grandmother. It's like, we can go over to your house for baking and for like new hats that will be way too warm except for in the depths of January.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah. So like, for me, I can only really build on what Tom had to say. And one thing that, like, if you are working from home, which if you're a vital worker, continue as you are, being a hero, fair play. For those who are working from home, to get to that, don't work from your bed. Like, get up and get into a pair of clothes and try to separate your work and life physically, be that the clothes you wear, the room you work in. If you have that luxury to be able to go into a different room, take it. And maybe, Tom, what you were saying there about making sure you get in contact with friends and schedule your calls, etc. You kind of touched on it there. It's the people you half know, that extra bit of substance in your life is the person you just get stuck talking to at the cooler, or the person you meet in the supermarket or something. It's just, don't just talk to your inner tight circle. If you have the time to talk to more people, just reach out to people that you haven't spoken to a while, that friends from your exchange, that person who you used to work with, whatever, and just have a chat. I think it's a really great time for people to kind of rebuild bridges or reach out to people that they haven't spoken to in a long, long time. So use this time. Don't be thinking of all the things you could have done after this, because we have so much time to think about what you could do right now, and you can just do it. Two things for me, by the way, as well. I've started trying yoga because I now have the time to do it in the morning, which was once my commute. So giving it a go. I'm poor at it, but it's a bit of fun. And I do it with one of my housemates, and we both fall over, and it's grand. And like, there are so many great classes being made available online at the moment for all sorts of different sports and courses, etc. Like, even the local yoga place here in Brussels, where I live, is making their classes available for free, and you can dial in on Zoom at 3 different times every day. And just join in the class, and camera on, camera off, do as you wish. And actually, Padraig Harrington, the golfer, for example, is putting up these brilliant tutorials on different types of shots that he would do. You know, these are the sorts of like golf things that would cost thousands usually, and you've just got Padraig Harrington going into extreme detail because it is Padraig Harrington. It's brilliant.
That's really cool. And I think the point as well about making that sort of psychological difference between you when you're not at work and you when you're at work, when both of those environments are the same environment at home, that's really important. So, for example, this weekend, girlfriend and I, we work in the living room. We've got a little pull-out table that we use. For the weekend on Friday, we like consciously put that away. So it felt like it was the weekend, and our work kind of wasn't out. We can't bother to put that away every night. But yeah, like, just kind of having the little things like that, little behavioural nudges, just so you know within yourself, yeah, okay, it's no longer work time. I think that's really, really important. I think kind of just to bridge to another question as well, Joe from Fantasy Football Scout, follow him obviously on Twitter, but also News and Features on Instagram, said that self-isolation has seen this middle-aged FPL podcaster start using Instagram for the first time in years. What new skills have you learned or plan to learn during this hiatus? So I think this probably answers that question to some extent, doesn't it? So Adam doing knitting, I'll be needling him about that for quite a while. And Stag, it sounds like yoga.
Continuing my French classes as well, but via Zoom, but continue there with the knitting.
No, I was going to say it's a good point. There are so many, especially for languages, there are so many good free resources available online. So now really is the perfect time to learn another language. You can use Duolingo. There are loads of good apps on the App Store for that. And yeah, sort of try and just expand your mental horizons as your physical horizons have been somewhat limited.
Yep, you reap what you sow. Isn't that right? So one question came in on Cash League calls, and it was from Mike Hamilton at Hambo22, and he asked, "What will you guys do regarding prizes in Cash mini leagues, and what might be considered fair?" Mike goes into whether people should be asking for rollovers right now, and he notes that the picture of person who's asking that is at the bottom end of the table, so maybe they have ulterior motives behind looking for cash outs now, or it's difficult. So for me, I think prizes should be given to now, and then you should maybe split your your prize pool for whatever occurs in this later thing. I'm so convinced that this mini World Cup or mini game has to be created that I'm almost banking on this right now with my tips, which is just split the prize pool and have two separate sets of prizes. And if everyone's happy with it, do that.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I think that obviously wait and see what FPL say. Like Stag and I are both in a mini league, and I think that we're kind of considering what to do. The rollover probably does make sense, but I guess if you're the guy at the top of the mini league, you're saying, well, don't roll me over. I've got all the money here. I want my payouts. So I think stuff like monthly payouts. So every month I'm guessing there's prizes, getting a high score half the year, like stuff like that, which has already been settled. Settle that, and everything else. I think depending on what FPL says, should I think be rolled over, or some sort of agreement can be made. But yeah, everything that's already kind of been settled should be settled. It's very complex and depends on the rules of your mini league, of course. Adam, can you continue this thread for me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved in any cash leagues personally because I'm terrible at the game. And I think, I mean, in an ideal world, perhaps if you can't agree on what to do, perhaps just donate it to charity, donate it to a local charity, donate it to a local food bank. But yeah, if you want to allocate a winner necessarily, maybe sort of take whatever percentage of the season has been completed so far, give that amount to the current leader, and then portion off the next bit for however this season ends up finishing, I guess.
Yeah, sounds fair. Right, next question. Eric Freeman. He implores Adam to give an hour-long monologue on the topic of if this FPL asset were a cheese, he would be. I think what might be better is to throw a few names at Adam and see what he does. So let's start off with Olivier Giroud.
Olivier Giroud is a fine, I'd say a fine Gruyere, possibly, luxurious, soft, you sort of think about him every now and then. Good with the ladies. Sorry, I got distracted there. Next player.
Stag.
John Terry.
I mean, he's like your basic sort of store-bought British cheddar that goes off after a week, and you sort of don't really know what it tastes like, but it tastes bad. It tastes like the wrapping that it comes in.
Dear me. Carney.
A little bit more exotic, maybe like a Wensleydale and cranberry. A little bit of a fruity twist on your more traditional sort of big man striker, because he's got the little flair in there. Every time you bite down on a cranberry, you're like, ooh, a little bit zesty,
All right, certainly makes sense.
Leighton Baines.
Leighton Baines, reliable, sturdy, been around for a while. Maybe something like a Red Leicester, often overlooked, but nevertheless sort of a firm favourite amongst many.
Gary Mabbott.
Gary Mabbott. That's a tough one. Blue cheese, maybe a bit of an acquired taste, slightly old. I don't know. That's a tough one.
David James.
David James, a bizarre creature, a little bit different. Used to be quite good, then sort of faded towards the end. So let's go for Let's go for fondue. Yeah, fondue used to be fashionable. Now is sort of a little bit cringeworthy. There we go. David
I
James
got
fondue.
you. I got you. The pecorino of goalkeepers.
A bit liquid as well, and that he could also play as a striker when needed. Very
Indeed.
versatile in that
Fluid.
sense.
Yeah, fluid football. All right, and finally, David Beckham.
All bark and no bite. A bit too showy for me. I'm trying to think of a showy. Maybe something like a mozzarella. So a lot of style, no substance.
Yeah. All right, Stag's got one.
Shokran Mustafi.
There. Leerdammer, holes everywhere.
Oh yes, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted.
So a Peter Griffin meme, isn't it? He said it. All right, and in a similar vein, Rich FPL asks, "What are your favourite jokes?" Actually, quite a difficult one because, like, a lot of the time, my jokes, I'm not the sort of person who has like a full-on here's the joke and tells the joke. It's more reacting and being reactive to what's going on, what's being said, like meta humor, running jokes. If you did listen to this podcast in normal times, you probably know that we do have a lot of running jokes which do run through the podcast, and a lot of people do not like it when they first listen, and I hope do kind of get their head around it eventually.
So jokes that
really dry.
knit the conversation together.
Yeah. Oh god. I've absolutely balls it up, haven't I? Really, I should have kept that thread going.
No, you were
but
going
yeah, no.
well. You were going fine.
There's no pulling the wool over your eyes.
Oh, we're linning them up now, aren't we? Really. But yeah, pun-based humour, as you can probably hear, is also one of a favourite of mine. You guys, what do you reckon?
I discovered a new genre since I first saw this question being asked, and it's Adam talking about cheese. It's really far up my list at the moment. Yeah, but a bit like Tom, I'm a man who likes irony. I like references. I particularly like Irish humor and stuff that kind of links back to maybe the past a little bit with a bit of wit, maybe that throws in the classics. These are the things I like.
I hear you're a racist now, Father.
Oh, Jesus.
I think he's after the Chinese has taken on a whole new sense of resonance now, hasn't it? Adam, what do you reckon?
I guess like you guys, I'm more of a pun fan than necessarily a traditional joke. I mean, I sort of grew up in a house where my dad thought the height of humour was the classic. What's the best time to go to the dentist? 2:30 kind of stuff, like things that would make a Christmas cracker embarrassed, really. So no, I'm much more of a fan of puns than traditional jokes, I think.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. I'm glad that you managed to get out of that particular bind. Right, okay, moving on. The best Premier League goal ever. Our friend FPL Secrets on Instagram asked, "What's your favourite Premier League goal ever?" Adam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one for me. I have to mention probably two Arsenal ones first up. So I'll go Jack Wilshere against Norwich, the beautiful tiki-taka goal. I can't remember when it was, but him and Olivier Giroud with some excellent interplay. And then Olivier Giroud again makes another appearance with the scorpion kick goal against Crystal Palace. I just think that's...
Yeah.
And it was... I think it was a couple of weeks after Mkhitaryan scored a similar one for Man United. So I'd never seen a scorpion kick in a live game before. And then all of a sudden there's two in such a short space of time. It was really, really bizarre.
And the birth of the meme, scorpion kicks like buses, aren't they? Right.
I
Stag, what do you
definitely had that Wilshere versus Norwich goal on my list. I kind of picked out three different types of goals. So you have the tiki-taka of that Wilshere goal. You have the sheer unbelievableness of the Rooney bicycle kick versus Man City. At that time, that was an absolutely classic game. And just maybe it had the wow factor of a scorpion kick goal, but being scored by, the player that was expected to carry his team against the rivals, there was much more to it than just the goal. Kind of a bit like Ronaldo or Bale's bicycle kick goals in the Champions League, which also a bit like London buses came together. And another one that came to mind was Papi Cisse against Chelsea. Kind of a totally different type of goal. Yeah, proper just belter from range that kind of confounds the usual laws of physics. Just brilliant.
You know, I had Papi Cisse as one of my two. The other one's Dennis Bergkamp, Arsenal versus Newcastle. So the ball comes in from Perez on the left, hard to feet. Bergkamp has Toon legend Nikos Dabazas tight on him. There's one elegant magical touch. The Dutch master flicks the ball round and sits down the Greek defender, and one flowing pirouette before calmly placing it in the bottom corner. Exquisite. Obviously, you have all these sorts of goals, like David Beckham against Wimbledon from the halfway line, Tony Yeboah's smasher for Leeds. So there's lots of ones, but I think everyone has one sort of emblematic one that they always remember, and I think that's one of mine. That's one of the ones. It was 2001, I think it was.
Something that people might like to watch, maybe for throwbacks or just because they've never seen it before. In FIFA 2006, there was this built-in like video you could watch, and it was like 10 of the best goals of all time, up to obviously 2006 at that point, and it included the Yeboah goal, it included the really good Canio volley, it included an Eric Cantona goal where he kind of had a quick interplay, I think with like Brian McClare or somebody. And
Was
then
it the chip over Hans Sager?
Yes, yeah. Before my time, but quite the goal. There was a Ronaldinho one in there. It's class, and it's done to really good music as well. I highly recommend someone going and watching that over the next months, years.
Yeah, exactly. I do think the best, probably one of the best goals I have seen, which is a bit unfortunate because it's against my team, was the Ryan Giggs goal. I think that would be the one. If someone said which goal, like, do you think was probably the best one ever? I think at the time in that game, that was just insane. Frankly, I mean, yeah, okay, the Solskjaer goal as well in Champions League for a different reason as well. That was just objectively as a moment that was great, but. In the Premier League, yeah, that Bergkamp goal. Right, so getting away from football, back on to Adam. The spotlight shifts. He's shaking his head there. It's Pritchard. No, I'm not going to say that. But, Morpheus Fire asks, how long will the queue of ladies outside Adam's door be once social distancing ends? I'm assuming there will be an unfulfilled need for puns in these times. And relatedly, Flapjack, hope you're recovering, mate. Shout out to you. Asks, will Adam be bringing back his Christmas profile picture to help cheer FPL Twitter up? Just to give you some context, this is Adam doing the boy band sort of crouch in front of a Christmas tree in very interesting attire, shall we say. No, he's not naked, in case that's what you're thinking, but he's wearing his Arsenal sort of pajamas. Yeah, I think it should be seen. It should be aired at some point. I wish I'd taken a screenshot of it at this point. So Adam, what do you reckon?
On the queue, I can't imagine. I can't imagine there'll be much of a queue. Certainly, I mean, my Twitter feed is always active of puns. If you need your fill there, because that is the only need I will be able to satisfy.
In fairness, like the first queue was a shock, and the second one, you know, it's amazing to have a sequel, but a third.
Oh dear.
Oh God. Oh, yeah, the very fabric of this pod has continued along the pace, hasn't it? Really. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe after this, Adam, things will heat up in the romance department. Who knows? Especially if you're giving them big jumpers to wear. Right. Next thing. North London is what? So he who does the pod from Planet FPL poses the following scenario. Football returns, but only of regional derbies. Arsenal versus Spurs happens 38 times. Who wins the North London League?
Honest answer, probably Arsenal women, because they're the only actual good team in North London. Like, genuinely, Arsenal women's are like a really fun, entertaining.
Mia Deem is great, isn't she?
Yeah, and Knobs as well. You know, they got some good players. But Arsenal v Spurs happens 38 times. Who's the winner? Not sure. Who's the loser? Everyone who has to watch it.
Oh God, no, you're probably about right.
I didn't consider the Knobs and Co. When I was thinking about it. I was just thinking about
always consider the Knobs, Stag.
Sorry, Adam, I just forgot for a second. But I was thinking about if you have Jose Mourinho at the helm for 38 games against the same club, he is going to be living rent-free, and that's hard to do in London, in Mikel Arteta's head. Like it'd be like with Guardiola, I guess Arteta's father, Pep Guardiola, back in their El Clasico days in La Liga. He really got into Guardiola's head and melted him eventually, and won the league title with Real Madrid that time, and basically caused Guardiola to leave Barcelona, if you're to agree with some accounts in the pro Mourinho media. And I also think as well that this might be finally the chance for Troy Parrott to come of age. I think it's the uncertainty of week by week playing different teams and different defenders is making Mourinho protect our boy. But I think when they're playing against the same team every week, he can kind of just slowly bed him into the first team, knowing what's coming. And Troy Parrott won't become a Premier League footballer, but he will become the anti-Arsenal footballer.
What you mean by bedding him in? He's going to play 20 minutes in the 37th game, and then Mourinho will kind of present that to the press as saying that that's how he
20
bloods
more
young
minutes
players.
is a victory for Irish football, Tom.
All right, next question then. Which manager manages you? Our mate Ali, Claret FPL asks, which current manager would you want to be your boss at your current job?
I definitely don't think it would be Chris Wilder. He seems like the kind of person that leaves reviews on Google Business. He's way too honest. Like he takes. So maybe someone like Eddie Howe, who doesn't really seem to blame his players that much if they play badly. He's got a job for life, so as an employee, you're pretty safe as well. But I'm basically just trying to think of who's going to give me the easiest ride possible and likely to overpay me. Because, I mean, if he thinks Jordan Ibe at like 15 million is good value, I mean, I must be worth at least a couple of quid.
Yeah, here's a man who voluntarily signed Dom Solanke. Right, so Stag, what do you reckon?
I took this as FPL manager as opposed to Premier League manager, so I've gone off in a totally different direction. And I'd settled in which current FPL manager would you want as your boss? So I was like, oh, well, it's Chief for me. It's FPL Chief. He's a thoroughly nice bloke. I get on well with him, but I think he'd also give me the space I need to thrive. Like, he wouldn't be an overbearing presence as a boss. If I was to think of a Premier League, I think in my professional life, I kind of want someone who's going to like actually put the pressure on, maybe get the best out of me. But at the end of the day that you'll get the job done. And so for me, that's probably going to be Mikel Arteta. He doesn't have quite the same like erratic madness that Guardiola seems to bring. See Nathan Redmond here. But Arteta does seem like a thoroughly sound guy. He seems like someone who would actually consider people's mental state, and he just seems like someone who'd be good to have around.
Yeah, I think Guardiola would definitely be the sort of guy that if you handed something in and you'd made sure it was perfect, he'd be the sort of guy like, that's one pixel out.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'd send it to him at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday night. The next day you come in, it'd be completely rewritten. It'd be completely changed from what you gave him because he'd have over 40 completely. So definitely wouldn't want to work for Guardiola. Maybe Nunes would be my pick. He likes to have a small team. You're pretty kind of guaranteed to be in the inner circle if you are part of that small team. Doesn't seem to say very much outside the dressing room. All the players seem to love him and back him, but he doesn't really say very much. Doesn't seem to project very much. So I think that he'd be a kind of a strong silent type, which I kind of get on with. He wouldn't micromanage me. He'd let me go on with whatever I need to do, and I'd know the fact that I'm in the team means that he does love me. I think that'd probably be enough for me. And just has a very nice beard as well. So maybe it would be Nuno for me. Yeah. I'm not sure I could have Chris Wilder or Daishi. I think that'd probably be too much. They'd just be shouting at you every 5 seconds.
What about Daniel Farke, Tom?
Maybe, but I think that I just make too many jokes about his name and get sacked. Anyway, the final question this week, menagerie of questions of this very, very heavily edited podcast, is Tom Campbell, who asks, are you able to watch football as football fans when the football's on, or has fantasy completely won? Nick and I did a combined podcast in October, I think it was, back in the Halcyon days when everything was normal. We weren't all being plagued with Planet FPL. And James asked us a very similar question to this, which is like, would you prefer your team won the league or you won fantasy football? And for me, hands down, it is now I win fantasy football, given the nature of what we do, and think that, it's definitely very difficult to disentangle the two now. And in fact, I kind of probably take the game over the football. Like if FPL comes back into behind closed doors, I'll still get my fix as long as they sort it out, as spoken about above. I think that fantasy definitely is one. Like, it's very difficult to watch a game if there's fantasy involved and not like be thinking about that first. Obviously, if it's like a pure watch, if it's like a different league or something like that, then I can still watch the game and enjoy it. But with the Premier League, I find it very, very difficult to watch it and not think about fantasy now. In fact, it's impossible for me. So yeah, I think fantasy is completely one for me. How about you guys?
I think I'm still definitely a football fan first. I think mainly because I'm not good enough at fantasy football. I think if I cared too much about it and I was an Arsenal fan, that's just almost too much sadomasochism for my small little brain to handle. But no, I think it'll be interesting in a sort of meta narrative context to see how we all come out of this elongated break in terms of what is our relationship to football like. Are we going to be sort of frothing at the mouth for Burnley Aston Villa at 12:30 on that first Saturday, or is it going to be sort of a bit of a meh feeling? Are we going to have become accustomed to life without football? It's going to be an interesting one for me personally to see how my relationship with the game changes. But back to Tom's question, I think I'm definitely still a football fan first over fantasy.
So for me, you've kind of addressed this as almost like an Arsenal versus FPL type thing. I think both of you have in a sense. Whereas for me, okay, as a kid, I grew up as a Manchester United fan, but I wouldn't be the die in the wool type United fan still, if that makes sense. What I found was that as the team which I grew up with disintegrated bit by bit under when Ferguson left and then later the likes of Rooney left, and actually eventually it was Michael Carrick retiring, felt like a real line in the sand for me. And it was only when Solskjaer took back charge at United that I was just like, do you know what? This is the club that I liked again. And like there was a whole new generation of young players have come through, obviously, or the ones that they've bought in as well. And I found those a lot easier to get behind. And so I do watch United games as a fan. And I've actually been quite able to do that. I watch an awful lot of continental football, which I definitely watch as a fan too. But when it comes to your Aston Villas versus Burnley on 12:30 on a Saturday, I would never watch that, really. Unless it's going to be the return of football, trademark copyright 2020 this year, when I will certainly watch it if that is the first game in the return. I always just those are FPL games for me, and it's all about, like, I don't know, Ashley Barnes sneezing in the right direction and heading the ball into the net or whatever it may be that I need to happen. So somewhere between the two, Tom, to answer the question.
Cool, makes sense. All right, just a fun fact for you. You've been spun a yarn on this podcast by probably the lowest average age FPL podcast ever. So I'm 30, Stag's 23, and Adam's 22. So an average of 25 years old, this podcast. There's two quasi-beards on show. One of them is a Chinese, I can't grow a beard, but I'm hinting it. I could do it if I wanted to, sort of stubble. So just something I thought I'd put in now rather than at the start. Otherwise you'd all tuned out, wouldn't you?
So you're kind of like the Nemanja Matic in this thing, Tom.
I was thinking like the wise old head in the team.
Yeah.
Like Matt Letizia kind of teaching Alan Shearer how it's
I was
done.
thinking this modern day Man United. It's just like, who's over 30 in that United team? And there's very few left when you go beyond him. It's like,
That's
Adam,
true.
would you consider yourself to be a Mason Greenwood type character here?
Jesse Lingard, surely.
I thought I might be the Jesse Lingard. That, it's like everyone keeps saying I'm young, but I'm actually not the youngest one here anymore.
I'd gone for Juan Mata over Nemanja Matic.
I'd be delighted with that. I will be delighted.
God,
with
that's a great compliment.
Thank you.
I'd take that.
Yeah, exactly.
Take
A
that,
great compliment to myself. That's why I'd have taken that. Anyway, should we round that off?
No, let's keep considering how I could be Juan Mata. Yeah, okay.
I was going to say, it was for me, for guys over 30.
Oh. I was like, I'm taking it.
Oh, dear
yeah,
me.
like...
Definitely Jesse Lingard if you're overvaluing yourself.
Now
like
you've got it. Now you've done it. Okay, just to say, we are, of course, Who Got the Assist. You can find this pod on Twitter at WGTA_FPL, or you'll find Nick at WGTA_Nick, me, FPL Stag, at FPL Stag. The podcast is now on Instagram with Tom at WGTA.FPL. So if you're hip enough to be on there, check us out there. We were, of course, joined by our fabulous cheese expert and guest, Adam Pritchard, this week. You will find him on Twitter at 35who for plenty of puns.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Adam.
Thanks very much for having me on, guys. It was brilliant.
Oh, jeez. Yes.
I had to do it.
Yeah, you never come on again.
we will hopefully be back next week, and we will continue to pod for as long as people are listening to us. We talk about cheese and wool and things like that.
In the meantime, host this year, and we'll speak to you next week.
Please do stay safe. Thank you.
Bye.
There was
Pain in the
a
arse to
great
edit,
moment
but
there where
that was
Tom and
fun.
I were both quickly rushing through cheeses in our head to come up with a pun reply, and neither of us could do it. I was just stuck with feta in my head. I was like, I can't think of anything but feta.
Could have been feta. Oh dear.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?